Welcome to Rare Connection, the podcast where we amplify voices of the rare disease community and work to bridge the gap between patients, medical professionals, and the public. I'm your host, Joanna, and I'm glad you're here. I'm honored to welcome Nicki to the podcast. Nicki lives with a rare neuroimmune disorder called Neuromyelitis Optica, or NMO. After being misdiagnosed with multiple sclerosis for 2 years, she eventually received the correct diagnosis in 2018. Her journey has included vision loss, spinal and brainstem inflammation, and profound physical challenges. But it's also led her to advocacy, community, and purpose. She now serves as the ambassador program manager to the Sumaira Foundation, staying closely connected with leaders in the field and helping others find the very hope she once needed. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing discussed here should be taken as medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your healthcare regimen. Nicki, can you take us back to the beginning when you were, what were the symptoms that made you realize that something was wrong?
Um, Initially, I didn't even realize something was quite wrong. We have this vision place around here called America's Best, and they used to have a $99 special where you could go for 3 years and get your eyes checked. You didn't have to have insurance or anything, and I was a young mother. So I went the first year, and they had a kind of a baseline. And the second year I went, that was right after I gave birth to my son. And that was April of 2016. And he had realized when we got through the exam that just my right eye had the lens had dropped by 6 lenses, which is pretty severe, especially in one eye. And he had turned me over to a neuro-ophthalmologist in the area who suspected MS, but she couldn't make the diagnosis on her own. They kind of did a watch and wait and see what happens type of thing. My primary suspected similar, possibly MS. My father had had MS, and I was having, some tingling sensations. Nothing crazy, kind of like you slept on something wrong, or when your legs fall asleep. It was primarily in one leg, but it wasn't very alarming yet. Um, if we fast forward a couple of years, because this happened a few times, they just watched, it wasn't severe. Um, we fast forward to 2018, I started with some severe nausea. I had been throwing up for about 5 weeks. I went to ERs. They were telling me, you have the flu, go home. They were giving me Zofran. They were giving me fluids. And obviously, if you give someone an anti-nausea and some fluids, they usually perk up and they're better off to go home. My husband was trying to get whatever I had. He would drink out of my Gatorade and he got nothing. They did an endoscopy and only found erosion from me getting sick so much. Um, Towards that fifth week, my mobility it completely took a downturn. I couldn't make it up the stairs. The final ER visit, I couldn't make it from my bed to the bathroom, which is about maybe 15 feet. Um, and I remember falling right next to my bed, like my legs just wouldn't support my weight. And just feeling totally defeated and knowing that something had to give. I'm in and out of sleep in the ER, and he's shoving research in their face, being, like, could this nausea have anything to do with the MS we suspected? And at that time, I was kind of due for an MRI. Well, almost due, I should say, to kind of see how things had progressed. And he had gotten convinced them to bring in the MRI person on a Saturday. And I spent about 90 minutes in the MRIs. They did the um, the brain stem, the neck, the C spine, the T spine, and they admitted me right on the spot when they saw the MRI. So they knew something was wrong. I didn't know yet what was going on. I was told they're trying to figure out if it's MS or if it's something similar to MS. It's pretty scary. It was the day before Mother's Day back in 2018. I remember it very vividly. So
So, so you're able to walk now?
I am able to walk. I do have, we have a uh, walker that lives behind my bedroom door, just in case when I get sick or I get too tired. I will lean on it if I need to. I am able to do some distances, but I kind of feel my body out if I feel like I'm getting tired or I need breaks. I just kind of listen to my body. During the holidays, my kids will take turns pushing me in a wheelchair because I cannot handle 5 hours of shopping in a mall. There's just no way my legs can support it. But getting around my house, I work remotely, and I do advocacy with people remotely. I do a lot of Zoom calls and stuff like that. So I'm able to get around my house just fine. And we have 4 kids, so I've been really, really blessed to have their help around the house. My husband's amazing, lucky. Not everybody's got that sort of support. And I see that quite a bit in our community. So
Is the walker you're using a two-wheel or four-wheel wheel?
two-wheel. I did, in the initial phases, they did suggest using the four-wheel. Um, and I did have one for a little bit, but that was more because I had always loved going outside. One of my favorite things to do, especially in the fall, is apple picking. But I was afraid to do it because, the ground is so uneven. At that time, I was still regaining my mobility. And that's when they suggested get what she called I think she said it was a rollator type of walker with the 4 wheels and a spot where you can sit. Um, but yeah, I have kind of progressed right up to very, very short distance walking. I would say if I had to put a time on it, I could probably do one city block, but at a leisurely pace. I'm not running anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's pretty much where um how I've how far I've gotten. I did have some issues with my hips because of the NMO. I had been bedbound for a while, so it caused some bursitis, and I've had to have steroid injections in my hips to kind of deal with that. Those are usually setbacks, but physical therapy is pretty helpful with that. So,
So how long have you been in physical therapy?
so I've only really physical therapy, I took it about 6 weeks at a time. And it was twice. At
Mhm.
first, when I was first diagnosed in that first hospital, with the severe vomiting and stuff, there was talk about putting me in like an inpatient rehabilitation. And when I didn't respond very well to steroids, I was keeping food down, but I was still, I wasn't progressing well enough. My mobility was not coming back. They transferred me to another local hospital, and I had what's called plasmapheresis, where they put a central line in and they basically filter the bad antibodies out of your blood. And that I had very extensive in-house therapy there. Excuse me. And then after that, we did some physical therapy in the area. And that's also when we also picked up on the bursitis in my hip. So
So it sounds similar to when you're talking about plasmapheresis. It sounds a little similar to what they do for kidney failure.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much like that. That's almost exactly how they explained it to me. Explained it's kind of like dialysis for your blood. And I'm like, okay. And all these terms they were throwing at me in 2018 when I was in the hospital. They're like, do you understand what's happening to you? And I'm shaking my head, yes, but in my brain, I'm like, no, I have no clue. I've never heard
Yeah,
any of these terms before.
yeah, it can be scary.
It can
Um,
be real scary.
and
Yeah.
I remember going through retina detachment right before COVID.
Yeah.
Equally as bad. Um, how did you feel about um, how did it feel to be misdiagnosed with multiple sclerosis before actually getting the diagnosis,
So,
correct diagnosis for NMO?
so with multiple sclerosis, I understood why they were, what their thought process was because my father had some pretty severe MS. At least that's what we think. Back in 2005, he was diagnosed with MS, and it was such a severe, rapid progression for him. He had passed away by the time by 2010. So within 5 years, he had passed. Um, the difference, though, between the two is like with MS, there's a lot of you have progressive phases. With NMO, it's like an attack out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you have some weird sensory issue, some weird mobility issue. All of a sudden, your legs either feel heavy or you can't, fully support your weight. There's a lot of because it can affect your brain and your brain stem. There was the vomiting. Not everybody gets that. Then there's the optic neuritis. So it's like it can affect it a lot. And every time you have an attack with NMO, it's it's kind of like an accumulating disability, right? So with NMO, you have to make sure that you're catching those attacks early on because that's the only way you're going to limit the amount of disability somebody is left with. I do think personally that if they had diagnosed me correctly with MS or with NMO rather than MS, um, and really kind of taken seriously the optic neuritis in the first 2 years, I might still be driving. I might still have, the vision deficits that I have might not be as severe. So
Fortunately, we have to test for the common conditions before they do the positive, before they do the rare ones.
yeah, it's tough. And my dad too, like we've always thought, like, I wonder if we could ever get our hands on his medical records. I wonder what his spinal tap looks like. I do remember when I was because after all of this, I knew I was going to, look into disability. I knew that they were going to want my medical records, and I'm a lifelong learner. I crave knowledge. So, I I ordered all my medical records just to see what they were basing everything off of. And I remember reading the nurse's notes that we thought this was just MS. We'll call doctor, and they put his name in there. And I was like, just MS. MS is pretty bad. Like nobody
Yeah,
wants, this, you know? So that was the notes from my spinal tap. They had found some evidence of something going on there that was pretty extreme. So I think for me, knowing that, at the time it was kind of eye-opening and it made sense all of a sudden, but then also I had so many more questions now because I had never heard of this. And I'm like, okay, what is this? And at the time, if you were to look it up online and say, what is NMOSD? Like Google would tell you, you'd either be dead in 5 years. There were no treatments available at the time at all. Um, it was pretty scary. Like you're either going to be blind, dead, or in a wheelchair. And it's like, I don't want any of those options. I have kids,
yeah.
I'm here to fight.
Mhm.
So,
So, since it's affecting your brainstem, do you have problems with breathing?
um, with you said breathing.
Yeah, because it's affecting your brainstem. That's generally where that affects.
No, that's why they think the vomiting started. I do think so. I've had asthma my entire life. I have noticed at times like it seems to be more triggered since I had my son. So it's very possible. Like, do we know if that's asthma or NMO? We really don't know. I just kind of treat the symptoms as we go. Um, but definitely the vomiting was a really big one. And I would sleep like so many hours a day. Like, I'm not kidding. I would spend probably 16 to 18 hours asleep. And I was relying on my husband to take care of everything at the time. I'm grateful he was there to do that. But at the same time, we had kids, we had young kids. We also had a cat that needed surgery. So, I mean, he took it all in stride. That's all I can say about
Yeah.
that, you know. Um, but yeah, I think one thing I do have issues with, and we're actually trying to figure out how to deal with it, is one of the lasting things is swallowing. I have an issue with swallowing things. My eggs I have to douse with ketchup. I can't really do buns, like even when I want to. Not that I'm not a huge fan of bread to begin with, but greasy things, it's kind of like everything is very, very slow going down. Once it gets past where you actually tell your body to swallow and then your brainstem and below takes over. Um, you know, that for me is very challenging and um there have been a couple of scares. We have those basically those choking kits that you usually get um the EMTs have them, they kind of dislodge things in your throat. We have one in our bathroom upstairs here, and we have one in the car just because you never know when it's going to happen. Um, I've become accustomed to having drinks nearby at all times to help, try to loosen things. And I've noticed, hydration's key for me. Sometimes if I'm having a really hard time, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but like I'll go with a shake,
Mhm.
instead of actually eating. So yeah, I mean, you kind of learn your limits and then roll with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
So, let's see, were you newly diagnosed? But when you were newly diagnosed, how did you process the lack of clear up to date information about the disease?
I will be completely honest with you. I had a hard time with that. The doctor that was at the hospital with me, the attending, he actually ended up being my neurologist at one point, but he until he retired, he walked out of my room and he's like, "You know what? Don't Google it." And I was like, "What?" So what do you do in a situation like that? You pick up your phone and you start Googling. Um, like I said, I'm a lifelong learner. So my thing is, I kept checking on peer-reviewed, like recent peer-reviewed articles, and I might not understand all the science behind it, but I knew enough to look and see, what worked, what was the consensus. And one of the things that like really drove me crazy about it, and I figured this out before I even left the hospital, is that it was discovered in the 1800s, like 18, what was it? Oh gosh, Devick, they called it Debicks disease. It was discovered in 1894, and the diagnostic criteria wasn't even developed in 1999. So to me, that was like, okay, we discovered this and we assumed it was just, you know, a really bad form of MS and kind of put it on a shelf and didn't do further research on it for a little while, right? So in 2018, I'm looking at research that really is only about 15 years old, but the newer stuff wasn't as dark. I looked for community.
Mhm.
I looked for people that had exactly what I had. I actually found someone who was right around the corner from where I live. She
Oh,
doesn't live there now. She lives in New Jersey now, but um, I found that to be incredible considering there's only 22,000 Americans who have this. And that's increased since the testing's been available. When I was diagnosed, I was told there were 4,000 Americans. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy to think about, how many more people are out there that, you know, think they have MS and it's really not. It might be NMO, or it might not even be NMO. It might be another, sister disease that is a little bit harder to diagnose.
So many conditions do look alike.
Yeah, they do. And that's one of the reasons I went into advocacy, is because it's really important if a neurologist suspects anything neurological, because there's so much in that system that can go wrong. I if I was if I was one to if I was in their position, I would say, okay, if it doesn't cost us anymore, do these tests. Just
Yeah.
run the, you know, I think a lot of them in the beginning, like earlier years, didn't think they would get those positive, they wouldn't get those yes results. But the thing with NMO is, if you assume MS and you put someone on MS drugs, it can make it worse. Some of the drugs are known to make NMO worse. And it just, it can not only make the patient worse off in the long run, but it, it kind of sets you back on the appropriate treatment path, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
So the drugs can affect you differently too. It's
Yeah, there are a few drugs that are safe for both, which is great. But I think the knowledge on that when I was first diagnosed was really kind of in its beginning phases, because I only knew of two. Um, if you were to look at my actual blood test, so they found um with me, my clinical presentation is what told them I have NMO and not MS. My clinical presentation, like not just brainstem, but I have C2 to C6 is affected.
Mhm.
And that's the thing with NMO. NMO gives you a longitudinally extensive, is what they call, which is like two or three um, areas of your spine are affected. With MS, it's a very short. It's usually scattered throughout. Um, so there's a subset of us with NMO, about 30% of us do not carry the antibody that identifies NMO, which is it's called aquaporin 4, which is a water channel that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And all this stuff was coming at me at like warp speed, right? Like I still had no clue. I'm sitting here, I'm like, what are the chances, Uh, so I mean, yeah, it's just it's a whirlwind. I feel like the information out there, there's a wealth of it now. It's just sifting through the right stuff. Um, it, the Sumaira Foundation, I'll probably refer to them throughout as TSF. When I first started, they had just released a web page that said what you need to know about NMO. And because it was in layman's terms, but it referenced all that research I was reading. Um, it was refreshing to see it in like a not scary type of way, if that makes sense. Because when you're reading big words and medical terms and B cell depleters and immunosuppressants for life, it's like you start to get a little, I don't want to say hopeless, but a little down, because it's like, okay, before this, I was on birth control and a multivitamin. Now what? Now I've got a pack of things to manage my symptoms. So yeah, I think just kind of not giving up on information and knowing that I wasn't going to settle for what I was finding. I'm not the kind of person that would say, okay, 5 years, I'll live it to the best. No, we're going to go 10, 20, 30, 40. I'm going to watch my kids, graduate and their weddings and their kids. So.
and I'm actually trying to get this podcast into a university for this reason. So but it's a little widespread, and probably for that because it's covers every rare disease. So it's I have this is 50 this is my 51st episode right now.
Wow.
So
And rare diseases are insane. It's like, yes, there's a small amount of people with each disease, but like when you look at it collectively, there's something like there's millions of Americans that are affected. I think it was like 1 in 10 Americans either have a rare disease or know somebody. So I mean,
yep,
this it's incredible.
300 million.
Yes,
300 million.
yes. I knew the number somewhere in the back of my mind.
Yep, we have one of over 10,000 rare
Yeah.
conditions.
It's crazy. It really needs more attention and more
I actually
innovative.
have I actually have a TikTok video on that. Which we were going to do TikTok live, but we couldn't. But this it compares one rare condition, which is homocystinuria, my condition, to all of them, because there's the best evidence of that is really Every Life Foundation when they do the. That's probably the biggest um, group of people that you'll see
Yep.
is when they do Rare Cross America.
Yeah.
I mean, not Rare Cross America. The Capitol Hill.
I've participated in the Rare Across America a few times. I loved it. And I think it's really important that our legislative leaders hear our stories. Um, some of them actually have some things that, within those stories, there are pockets of those stories that they can relate to. And also humanizing our experiences because, we can send them a letter, but until you're face to face with them, they don't get it sometimes. Um, and not that they dismiss us or anything, but it's more of it's easier to kind of that personal connection, I guess, comes a little bit easier. Um, but yeah, Every Life has been great. I've also participated with NORD. They've been trying to set up a rare disease advisory council here in New York, and we did an advocacy day back in February. So that was pretty cool, going up to our state capitol and meeting with a whole bunch of, legislative offices there. So it was exhausting, but well worth it.
It would probably be hard for you to do it, but Rare Cross America, and maybe in Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill is what I was
Yeah.
talking about earlier. It's the biggest
Yeah, I'd
event
love
that they
to go
do.
to that. I swear that time frame during the year is like it's usually right after treatment time for me, and I always get worried that like, okay, I've just been given immunosuppressants and we just got through the holidays. But I do, it's kind of like one of those things that are on your bucket list. So I hope to really get down there for one of those. So
Yeah.
someday.
It's not the same in person, but I mean same as in person, but you can do it virtually also.
Yeah. Yeah, I have done a few virtually. That's how I kind of, got my toes wet in advocacy as far as policy goes. Was during COVID when they switched to virtual. I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. Um, you know, and it was great because and they give you all the information and help you along the way to kind of learn how to tell your story, your elevator pitch. I love one of the people that kind of told us how to tell their story. They're like, yeah, I got stuck in the elevator with somebody I had a meeting with, and I had 30 seconds to tell him, you know, what I needed to tell him. I'm like, well, that's an opportunity.
Mhm.
So,
So
uh,
yeah, you don't have a whole lot of time. So it's because there's so many people normally.
yeah, yeah. I know that during COVID when they started doing the virtual meetings, we did a New York one, and I remember there were like 30 of us on here and we had 15 minutes. It's like, okay, introduce yourself in 15 seconds and then go into
Yeah,
the ask. But I mean, it's worth it though, too, because
yeah.
there are other opportunities. I think even Autoimmune Association will do a fly-in. There's Patients Rising is another organization that does some of the similar work with similar to what Every Life does, but I think it's on a smaller scale, to be honest, more focused.
No, I
But
haven't heard of that one.
yeah, Patients Rising, I've done a little bit with them. I've been really kind of focusing on New York because I feel like the New York Rare Disease Advisory Group is really, really important for um, for rare disease patients here. We did have a group and it was sunset. Um, so what they're trying to do is make sure that that group stays um, permanent and will give advice to legislators and the governor about legislation that's coming up for rare disease patients. So,
So what is sunset?
sunset basically means they tested it out. It was in 2020 they tested out the Rare Disease Advocacy Coalition, and it was a work group, and they basically gave their recommendations on any legislation that had to do with the rare disease community. So it could have been step therapy, um, newborn screening was another one. And what happened was at the end of 2019, they entered a phase called sunsetting, which means they were going to basically out of commission unless it was extended. So we came in with a new bill and said, okay, we need a permanent rare disease advisory committee, like without that sunset phrasing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
But NOR does do a lot of good things also, but they also have a lot of funding and things they do.
yeah. So that's kind of been my focus outside of TSF is just making sure that our local New Yorkers have a voice. We do a lot of proclamations during awareness months to raise the awareness of those diseases. And I find that New York is one of the hardest states to get because you need to go and get your proclamation approved in the New York House, in the New York Senate, and then it goes to the governor. So it's very lengthy. Where a lot of states, you can just fill out a form as a constituent and say, this matters to me because, and you give them the reason and give them the whereas clauses. And a lot of them are on board. But New York has been notoriously challenging.
Yeah.
So
So,
hopefully that.
um, can you describe how NMO has affected your vision and mobility on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So my right side, it's a little bit annoying because it's when you step out of a shower and you look at the mirror and it's all fogged up. That's kind of how I see a little bit out of the right eye. My depth perception is next to nothing. I have walked into cabinets. I have fallen upstairs. I'm sure everybody has, but mine's for a different reason. My depth perception totally gone. Um, color, color saturation is huge for me. Um, I was just talking to my daughter about this, how like if I cover my right eye, I swear at this point, 7 years in, I think that my left is trying to overcompensate. Like my brain's trying to fix it somehow. But it's those three things are what really bother me the most with my eyes. I would say for mobility, you know, the fact that I can't be as physical as I once was, it's a little bit challenging. I can't go on those long shopping trips. I was just saying grocery shopping exhausts me. At one point I couldn't do that, but I mean, you know, the loss of independence. I can't drive someplace because of the eye and the mobility. Balance is still really, really hard. Um, I go to a gym and do gentle stretching and yoga. And last summer we were working in some like lightweight training and a little bit of cardio, and I bought myself an elliptical. And now 15 years ago, I could do 30 minutes on the elliptical and not think anything of it. But since this diagnosis, I'm lucky if I can get to 5 without, like, I'm not kidding. My legs feel like the muscles are tearing off the bone. Like, it's terrible. And that's me pushing myself. And then I pay for it for a few days afterwards. Like, I'm not getting up the next couple of days. So, I talked to a couple of the trainers at the gym, and they suggested, a recumbent bike. I had seen some people using those, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna switch out the elliptical for that. Which, one part of me is like, oh, the elliptical helped me lose all this weight, and the other one's like, well, you're entering menopause. What do you want? Like trying to take it with a grain of salt, with life's changes.
Menopause can affect too, so it's
Yeah,
gonna have a lot of those same issues. But it's
it's hard. Like
Mhm.
finding out what your body's new normals are and trying to respect them, or your body is going to tell you.
Yeah.
So,
And do you take advantage of if you do go grocery shopping, do you ever take advantage of the wheelchairs that they have, or they have
yeah,
scooters?
yeah, yeah. That is when they're available. I do also have, the handicap parking, and we use it almost religiously in the summertime. And I know it sounds a little bit backwards, but for me, it's the heat that really triggers a lot of my symptoms. It's exhaustion that triggers my symptoms. So, yeah, I definitely need the cart from time to time. I know my husband has hunted one down here and there. Like, I saw one on that side of the store. I'll go get it. And people will look at me because I'm young, and they're like, what do you need that for? And I'm like, shall I show you my medical record? You know? It's that whole invisible illness thing, you feel like you're constantly trying to legitimatize, if that's a word, you're going through, because not everybody can see it.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, you got to look a little bit deeper in order to see a rare condition.
exactly.
Sometimes I know I have bite marks on my tongue. I've broken bones and scars and stuff that I've shown on video to
Yeah.
show what this is like. But a lot
Yeah.
of us keep it hidden.
If I were to show them pictures of me in the hospital getting plasmapheresis, like you've got a picture of me with the central line in, and then behind me you've got the plasmapheresis machine, which, like you said, is very much like a dialysis machine. And then you've got a picture of me. No, it wasn't of me. It was the walker. They're like, you're going home with this. I'm like, yay, just turned into I wasn't even 40 yet. And I'm just like, I need a walker.
Yep.
It's so some acceptance too, I think, that you have to kind of wrestle with that diagnosis and really start to understand it before things can get better.
Yeah. I was 30 with my first stroke, so it's
Yeah.
um, it disease does not discriminate. It
No,
happens at any age.
no, it does
Even
not.
cancers happen to children.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
fact, all of the cancers that are childhood conditions are rare.
Yeah. My high school sweetheart had passed away from a rare bone cancer.
Mhm.
He just turned 20. So I mean, yeah. During our teen years, he went through that. It was called Ewing sarcoma. That one was
No, I've heard of it.
yeah, it's that is also in the spine. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Um, um, does yours vary depending on location outside of the United States? Do you know any international numbers?
For NMO.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure of the international numbers. Um, I do know that there was some recent studies that kind of looked at higher prevalence. There's higher prevalence among like African Americans and Asians.
Mhm.
Um, there is quite a bit of, if you go to the Sumaira Foundation's website, there is some um, research articles that we've put up that we helped support that will list more of the prevalence and where exactly. There's also one that's really cool. It's about a kind of along the same vein as like the employment and socioeconomical status about that and how that's affected by NMO.
Mhm.
Um, I found that to be really interesting because while yes, this can hit for anyone from like I've seen patients as young as 3,
Mhm.
and I just heard of a patient that's 75, so it can go the entire scope. But it's a lot more prevalent with women and typically women of childbearing years, which to me I find to be really interesting. I think there needs to be more research done there, because during those years, a woman's body is going through a lot of stress, hormonal and
Mhm.
everything else, that goes with having kids and a new family and establishing yourself. Um, but I do feel like that's a huge part of NMO and a lot of other autoimmune diseases too. Like it seems to be a really big trigger. Um,
Yeah. So it seems to be staying rare.
yeah.
Is it genetic? Do you know?
So they don't think it's genetic. There is a case where it's two family members. I can't remember if it's a sister and like two sisters or if it's a mother and a daughter
Mhm.
that have it. But there is, you know, with MS, there's that if you have a direct family member, your likelihood of developing it is higher. Um, there is some studies being done with genetics around NMO. I remember reading way back in 2019 that they identified some sort of DNA marker that like was more prevalent, I believe. It's been a hot minute since I read it, but like
Yeah.
do you believe it had something to do with like if this is present, you're more likely to develop it? But I feel like that's a lot of diseases, like those DNA chains, like so much of that makes up who we are. And it's kind of like the chemical reaction for me, like a trifecta approach, because what they told me is it's caused by initially an infection and your body goes haywire trying to attack that infection. And it goes on some sort of, overdrive and it starts attacking, the wrong things. Which that's where you get the swelling and the inflammation inside your body. Um, so I mean, I feel like it's kind of environment. It's kind
Mhm.
of what are we eating? What are we putting in our bodies? What are we putting on our bodies? What are we breathing in? And then also, nature, I'm sure, plays a role, but it hasn't been scientifically proven yet.
What symptoms, if any, still linger for you today?
Yeah, so sensory. Sensory is a big one for me. Um, I have a real big issue with hot and cold in my hands. That's a really, really big one. Like if I have to go take a shower, I'm checking it up on my wrist or higher up. I remember because my son was like 3 when I was diagnosed. I'm like, I can't even give him a bath without feeling like I might burn him, without using my upper arm. Um, so that became a little bit scary, and he's old enough now to do it himself. So I'm no longer scared about that. But I have burned myself on occasion because I don't realize how hot something is. I have been yelled at by my kids and by my husband, like, turn down the hot water on the sink. It's too hot. You're gonna burn yourself. It's scalding. How are you doing that? I'm like, but yeah, that's a big one for me. And also, like, especially when I get hot, um, I call it tingling. It really is that feeling when you're sitting Indian style and your leg starts to get, the ants feeling, ants crawling. I get that on my legs. Um, I
Sounds
also,
like a neuropathy.
yeah, I get it in my head. I've actually asked my husband to check my hair for lice because I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like something is just crawling all over me, and it's not. Um, so
Take
those are,
medication for neuropathy?
I do. I take gabapentin, but I don't take a lot of it because when I do take the higher doses, they want me to take 300, and I know it's not a huge dose for the type of neuropathy I have. They want me to take 3 doses 3 times a day, and we've gotten it to twice a day because if I take it too much, I don't feel like cognitively 100%, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. So maybe there's something better, but that Lyrica did not work for me. And I know there's others, but we just haven't found um,
Right.
the right one yet.
Mhm.
So
I take one that is a combination of B vitamins, but it's for diabetic neuropathy originally.
yeah,
The brand name one, Metnex, is the brand name, but they remarketed it for my condition under Fultonex. So it's because there's folic acid in it. So
yeah.
it's folic acid, B6, and B12 are the three.
One other thing really, it can get pretty bad at times is spasms. I get them a lot in my legs. I'll get them in my shoulders. Not so much my hands or my wrists, but definitely shoulders, legs. Um, I'll get them in my face. It's actually kind of funny when it happens, but it's also very uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, that one I seem to be, it's not as extreme as when I first got diagnosed. That first year it was pretty bad. Um, but also I started taking magnesium.
Mhm.
And that seems to help a lot with the spasms. Um, and it also helps me with sleep. So I'm like, win-win.
Yeah. So, what what treatment or therapies have helped you stay relapse free for the past 7 years?
I would say staying on rituximab every 6 months. We did try to switch it once because they didn't want me coming into the infusion center during COVID and potentially getting sick because it was a large infusion center. And the area I was, they were kind of the epicenter of taking people, the overflow from like New York City. Um, so I think Rituxan has helped. Also just managing those symptoms. So I also have neurogenic bladder from this, from the lesions on my spine. It caused neurogenic bladder, and we used to do Myrbetriq. We used to take Myrbetriq, but it stopped working. And I have an issue where I won't empty completely and I can't tell. So that turns into UTIs, and UTIs can turn into symptoms coming back pretty fiercely, actually. So what we started with that was Botox in my bladder, and that's also done every 6 months at the urologist's office. Both are, the rituximab and the Botox. If I had to choose two things that like I couldn't live without at this point, it's probably those. Um, I would rather not have a 6 hour infusion with rituximab, but if it keeps me out of the hospital, okay. You know, um, for people that test positive for the aquaporin 4 antibody, there are now 4 drugs on the market that insurance will pay for. from what I've been told at this point, the only way I can get on any of the new FDA approved drugs is if my body fails on Rituxan. So if I end up in a relapse, or if, my IgG levels go way too low and it's suppressing my immune system far below where it needs to be. So that's basically, those are the two main things. Self-care and just pay attention. That's been a game changer for just all over listening to my body. So if I try to push through, I will be in bed the next day without a doubt. Um, I would say those are the most significant things.
It does sound like a lot of your symptoms are stress related.
Yeah, yeah, stress on my body too. Yep. And I've had to learn how to kind of, before all this, I was a bit of a overthinker, a little bit of a worrier. I'm not gonna lie about that, would never deny it. But you know, I've really learned that if I want to have the best day possible, um, I have to kind of take a step back and not worry about the things I can't control, but focus on, okay, you're feeling a little bit off. Let's take a seat back. Let's get a drink. Let's relax a little bit. Read a chapter in your book and then do what you got to do. Kind of remembering that not every day is going to be the same and to give myself a little bit of grace because, you know, I think that's part of it too, is like we get into mom mode and I'm taking care of everybody else. And before I know it, my body's like, hey, don't forget to take care of me.
Yeah, there's a person I did a podcast with 4 episodes ago.
Yeah.
And she was saying that she heard of actually a book and it's on every single healthcare system, but she was doing one thing that I never recommend anybody do, but and I've run into this situation a lot, and it does cause healthcare problems for you too, often heart problems. But she was staying up like almost 24/7 trying to take care of her kid.
Yeah.
And people consider it to be selfish, but it's really not.
Yeah.
And it was really,
So when we had the emergency and had to reschedule this, my daughter had gone to urgent care and we found out that she had a um, abscess on her leg. She's been going through a bit of a diagnostic journey herself. Something rheumatological is going on with her. Her CRPs are through the roof, and Mama Bear will deal with that tomorrow at rheumatology. But anyways, she was in the ER. She went from urgent care. She left urgent care at 5:30 p.m. and urgent care is about 3 blocks from my house. So I made it there just in time to take the ambulance with her. We were there till 7 a.m. She slept. I didn't. Knowing my body needed it, I didn't because every time I overheard someone out in the, cubicles saying 19-year-old possible sepsis, I'm just like, I'm roaring awake, but yeah, I can totally feel it because it took me 3 or 4 days to actually start to feel what I was calling human again. That first day I was a zombie. Couldn't do
it's
it.
kind of surprising that they'll let you take the ambulance with her because, maybe it's different for a parent, but I've tried to do that with clients, and
Yeah.
because I work as a caregiver for DHS, and which state goes through Medicaid, but they um, will refuse to take me in the ambulance.
Yeah.
They don't so much since now that we're past the extreme things with COVID normally.
Yeah.
Um, they don't deny me in the hospital, but they do deny me. They won't take me in an ambulance. I actually have to meet my client at the hospital.
Yeah. And that's what my husband did. He followed all of us up there. I was surprised they were letting me too, but I was like, I had not. She called me from urgent care. She's like, okay, so they want me to go to the hospital. And I'm like, why? What's going on? And she told me, and I'm like, give me about 5 minutes and I'll be there. And I got there and I didn't stop with the questions. And I don't know if that's why they let me go in. Like I was rapid fire. I'm like, okay, what's this? And why, all the things, especially when it's your kid. Um, yeah, it's been a whirlwind, but I'm grateful that, with all of the things that I've been through for me, um, I've been in an ambulance once with this, and I was on my own, but it wasn't far. It was like 5 minutes from one hospital to the other, and my husband was at work, so he knew what was going on. He knew I was getting transferred. And the kids weren't they they didn't really see all of that, and I'm kind of grateful for that because um they're really compassionate now, and they understand that I'm not gonna do as much as we used to, but they remind me too. They're kind of like, I hate to put it this way, they're kind of like my watchdogs. They're like, should you be doing that? How are
Mhm.
you doing, mom? You know what I mean? But I don't think they would really see things from that lens had we not gone through what we went through. I
Mhm.
remember FaceTime when I had gone to get the port put in, and she was 12 at the time, same girl that I went to the ER with recently. And she's like, Mom, what's that? And I said to her, I was like, all right, so something's going on with mommy's body, and you know how cars, they need their oil changed? I said, well, they're taking mommy's bad oil out and putting good oil in. And I'm like, that was the only way I could think of with my limited knowledge to explain to her, like, this is what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they've all been, and with I have education in early childhood education, so I try to apply, my what I knew to how
Yeah.
they grasp things and kind of give it to them in bite-sized pieces. And now she
Yeah.
wants to go for medical, so and advocate. So I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who get into those two fields, especially education with rare diseases.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many of us are teachers started out that way, at least. And uh, medical too, I can see because, especially if you know somebody with the condition or you have it yourself. But the last person I was with, I kind of surprised and did it backwards. He didn't, he wasn't diagnosed with either one of his conditions until after he was a researcher for 8 years.
Wow. Yeah. And for me, it's the complete opposite of that. Like I was reading the research from my hospital bed with doctors that are key leaders in the area of NMO, and now I talk to them via email on a first name basis, some of them, So I mean, it's kind of like a mind-blowing 360, but it was eye-opening. It was probably, oh my gosh, one of the most beautiful tragedies, I guess you could say, because like it just opened my eyes to the rare disease community. Like you don't know what you don't know, and unless you are diagnosed or somebody is diagnosed, you don't really have a reason to look for that information.
Right. Also, it's interesting how it that's put into perspective that they can be a good thing. I was actually diagnosed because my lenses did were dislocated. Yeah, they dislocated, but we would never have noticed that
Yeah.
had I not run trisodium phosphate in my eyes.
Wow. It's crazy. Yeah.
And it's commonly misdiagnosed as Marfan syndrome. So it's
Yeah. It's incredible.
Were there any turning points in your care, either a new doctor treatment or approach that really made a difference?
Um, I think for me, and I would say meeting other patients was a turning point, but I don't feel like it was a turning. I think it was a pivot. Um, I think it was a little further down the road. I met the first patients I met in 2019 at a patient day, late March, early April. And I think being in the same room with people that understood me and understood my journey, specifically with this disease, it was a bit eye-opening. But so that was 2019, and then 2020 COVID happened, and um I think realizing just how isolating rare diseases was, and I had been volunteering already at that point. I knew I wanted to make a difference. I just didn't know how. I didn't know what it would look like for me. But not COVID itself, but the isolation of it made me realize, okay, I got to remove stressors. You know, anything that doesn't feel good to us as a family, anything that doesn't help me, you know, personally, physically, all of the things, it needs to go. And I started setting up some pretty stern and pretty big boundaries with family members, with friends, with, okay, if you're not going to, you've been sick recently and you want to come around, it's not happening at my house because I'm not going back. I'm not going in the hospital, not right now, right? Um, so I think that was a really big thing, was just kind of realizing that there were things I could control. But also looking at the positive. By 2020, there were already three, it might have been actually 2020 that they were approved. There were three FDA drugs coming out. And even though I couldn't access them, it was promising to see that type of research because it takes years for any of that to come through. And I had just been diagnosed a couple years prior. And she's like, there's no treatment for this at the time. So I think looking back at, just seeing all of that innovation in such a short period of time really, really made things look brighter for me. And then I always go back to focusing on what I can control, like, 20, I think it was 2019, late 2019, early 20, no. So my mom had had a stroke and she had cancer between the time I got diagnosed in 2021. So there's a period of time where it's kind of like grouped together in my mind, right? And like trying to advocate for her and tell her what her tests mean while, they're not giving her answers, and, not being able to be there for her during COVID because they weren't letting anyone in hospitals. I think it was just kind of me sitting back and being like, okay, let's see, what can I control? But the first doctor I saw after I went to the hospital, she was actually an NP, and I didn't feel like I was very listened to with my concerns with her. She just wanted to give me more gabapentin and deal with the symptoms, but not the root cause. And I did end up switching to the doctor at, so he was out of Albany Med Center and he's since retired, but I can say he was definitely very inviting. He listened to your concerns. And a lot of his patients, his nickname was the Nutty Professor because that's the kind of personality he had. He had a way of making you smile, but actually, he could be serious too. So I think just knowing, when to step back, when to let go of something and be like, all right, that's not that's not for me, not my circus, not my monkeys. Kind of let it go. That was key.
How did you get involved with the Sumaira Foundation?
Yeah, so that patient event that I went to in California, um, it was with the Guthy Jackson Foundation out in California. They do an annual patient day where they get patients and industry leaders and doctors together. And I'd gone to that and I had ran into um, Sumaira Ahmed. She's the founder and director of the Sumaira Foundation. And she had told me that she was planning on starting an ambassador program and to keep my eyes open, and she'll tell me more about it later. And when she launched the application, I applied. Like I said, it was very brief, but I have also been in the process of telling my story through her platform. She had been looking for patients to kind of just put on paper what their stories are. And the hope was someday a doctor or somebody would look back and kind of connect the dots, you know. Um, Back then, I think I was story 50. I think we're somewhere close to 200 right now.
Mhm.
I quote that number, but I know we're close. But yeah, that's how basically I started is I ended up just running into her and she's like, I have this idea and I'm gonna do this. Keep your eyes peeled. And I did, applied, and there were 10 of us around the US. And at this point we have 98 ambassadors in 32 countries. So if that tells you anything
Yeah.
about the need for this, it's been a community that's grassroots. I know that I can reach out to any of the ambassadors and just kind of put a question in a group, and someone's up somewhere around the globe and they're going to answer, you know. I don't feel alone anymore. That's definitely true.
Yeah. So what does it mean to be, mean for you to be, to, you know, to now to manage the ambassador program that once gave you hope?
Honestly, it's a little mind-blowing at times. Because I do think back to that. I'm like, there was just us. But it's also really neat to be giving people hope. Knowing that people that are just being diagnosed or caregivers of people just being diagnosed, that I can help guide them. I can help get them the resources they need. I can connect them with people near them so that they can look at local resources, other foundations that kind of fill the gaps and bridge where we don't, um, the areas that we don't go into, if that makes sense. But it's been an absolute whirlwind, in a positive way. You know, it's kind of like a bonus family. Um, I can, all the different people we have in all the different countries, like I wish we could have one global get together, like,
Mhm.
and just hug each other. We share a lot of stories that are similar. Uh, and just recently in the last year, we started with some clinician ambassadors. So we now have clinicians that are researching in the area of NMO coming on to kind of help us and be an exclusive resource to the patients and caregivers that are ambassadors.
Mhm. So do you do conferences?
I do not go to like big conferences or anything. Again, travel is a little tricky for me sometimes, especially when you have, you know, three kids living at home, and you're immunocompromised. I do a lot of the virtual ones when I can locate them. So like the Global Genes, when Nord has their summit. We do patient days. Like I've gone to a couple of different patient days. I'm gonna try to make the one in Chicago this coming summer. But I try to like pinpoint one a year to
Mhm.
kind of like focus on. I would love to one day go to like some of the neurology conferences, but like the price for registration for a patient, it's just too steep. to be completely honest,
Mhm.
But it's really kind of invigorating to see all the research that's going on.
There's a lot of people. So this is another question I didn't think of. I'm thinking of a lot of them, but a lot of patients go really far out of the way uh, for healthcare. How
Yeah.
far do you travel to get to see a doctor?
So, I only go 30 minutes. I'm really lucky. Um, when my last neurologist retired, he basically put in a standing referral and said, give the new girl a try. And if she doesn't match up to what you think, there's a standing referral to um, Dr. Levy, who's one of the top doctors. He's in Boston and I'm in New York. So that's 2 hours, 45 minutes by car. So that was on the table for a little while when they were transitioning care. But I feel like things are going pretty well. It's always in my back pocket. I have talked to Dr. Lee. I'm like, so can I come up to your clinic? And he's like, sure. It's more of the other side of that too is because it's cross state lines, I would have to get it approved every time I go up there. And that's a little bit, not that it can't be done, it could be done, but it's a whole nother thing to manage. And he's willing to consult on my case on an as needed basis. So we're gonna leave it as it is for now.
Uh, so yeah, it's amazing how that's another popular name in the medical field uh, with rare diseases, especially because uh, wondering if all these Dr. Levy's are related because there's
Yeah.
one for homocystinuria, there's superficial siderosis, and now there's this one too.
Well, this is Michael Levy out of MGH. He used to be at John Hopkins.
Yeah,
Um,
uh, superficial siderosis, that was also my Levy.
yeah, it's very possible, you know, but yeah,
Uh,
pretty stuff.
can you tell us about some of the projects or grants you've supported through TSF?
So I can't take credit for these at all because I wasn't the one that said go for it. But some of my favorite projects that we've supported at TSF, I would have to say is the socioeconomical ones. Ones that really tell you what the effect is on, the patient's livelihood, the quality of life type of research projects. Um, Another really, really cool one, which I think is really important for health equity, especially in underserved areas. Dr. Farah out of MGH, she developed so it's like a litmus paper test for the aquaporin 4 bodies and the specificity. Ugh, can't talk tonight. But it's pretty accurate. So figuring out how to get that into the right places is pretty, that's a pretty innovative um, project that they're working on. Another one, uh, lifelong learner again. We do a series called From the Experts, and I always look forward to the different topics that we cover, even if they don't apply to me directly. One thing I think every patient needs to look at, and not just NMO, but um, different illnesses that use steroids. Dr. Stacy Clardy did a From the Experts with us, and she went into what are the long-term effects of these steroids? Because, like with Rituxan, I get IV steroids every time I get Rituxan. And then, if we have a suspected flare and we're trying to figure out what's going on, I might be put on an oral dose of steroids and see how, things progress or not. So, I think those are the most important things and the most impactful.
Mhm.
And then we've also done things like, specialists talking about disability or insurance, navigating transition from teens to adult care. And that obviously doesn't affect me, but I just find it really interesting and how things can really slip through the cracks if it's not done right. Um, yeah, I think those would be the main things I would look at.
What do you wish more medical professionals or other medical or the public understood about enema?
Um, it's not MS. And that, I think that's my main thing is like, yes, it was discovered 100 years ago. People thought it was MS for about 100 years. And I feel like there's still emerging research because of that. And, I kind of don't even want to say it was bookshelved for 100 years because it kind of wasn't. I mean, there was some stuff, but it wasn't at the rate we see cancer being, researched. Like a cancer that's discovered, say, in 1900, you're going to see peer-reviewed research throughout the years, but like there was just a very long time where you didn't see many breakthroughs. Um, and the fact that, the testing wasn't even available until I want to say 2015. There's two types of tests. There's an ELISA and a cell-based assay, and the cell-based one is a lot more efficient, um, more sensitive, and just knowing that, if I had showed up with symptoms 10 years ago, they wouldn't know how to diagnose me. So, it's still emerging. There's, who knows, some of us seronegative people might have other antibodies that they discover. I mean, the aquaporin 4 was discovered in 2004. So, what else is out there?
Mhm.
But it's not MS. So
Yeah.
don't go there. But that testing, they have to do the testing. Like that's one of my biggest things. I want to see the medical community test more often before they start treatment, because if you test after you've started steroids or you've done Plex, you're already filtering those antibodies out. So of course you're going to get a negative, which is kind of what they thought happened with me. Um, it and then having people wait for their treatment to see if they pop up positive is also dangerous. So test, always test in the beginning. So
Mhm. Are there any common myths or misconceptions that you often have to correct?
yeah, so one that was like really prevalent when I first started on my journey was I would see, MS and NMO being compared to each other, and some people even saying that it's the same disease, and I'm like, which is true. And obviously we've learned now that, it's not MS. You cannot have NMO and MS. It's one or the other. They're two very distinct diseases. And that's why they developed the diagnosis criteria so that, they could differentiate between the two. So yeah, I think that's really is making sure that, the whole both thing is it's just not a very common thing. Um, and that there still are people without the antibody. I know it's only 30 at this point, but when I first was diagnosed, it was like 60% of us didn't have it. So we're getting a little bit more accurate, but I think it's going to take some time.
So what's the difference in between the two tests? How are they tested?
So they're both blood tests. I couldn't answer exactly on the specifics of the two tests. I do know that I want to say the ELISA was developed first, and then the cell-based assay, it's been developed since then, and it's a little bit more specific. And the cell-based assay, if I'm not mistaken, goes to Mayo Clinic in Rochester and is Um, like, it's conducted there, and then you get the test back. It takes about 6 weeks to get the test results back. Um, yes, you're waiting a little while and you can start treatment during that time, but at least you've started, the process of getting an accurate diagnosis.
Mhm. How do you cope emotionally during the most difficult parts of your journey?
Um, Support, family support, therapy. There isn't enough words that can be said about therapy, even virtual therapy, having somebody to talk to that is not partial to what's going on can kind of point you in the right direction when you think you're overthinking something. My husband was the absolute rock during all of this. I don't think I'd be alive today if it wasn't for him, because that final ER visit, I just wanted to sleep while he shoved research in their face, and tried to have me get up to walk. And he's like catching me. He's like, "What are you doing?" You know, um, he definitely has been my rock. And, you know, emotionally, I went into the hospital and I had my own business. And when I left the hospital 4 weeks later, I didn't have my business anymore because, I had a childcare business from my home, and they needed to have reliable care too. And as a mom, I understand that. So, when they told me that they were going to look for somebody else, I understood. But, I was down all of a sudden a full-time income in a household of five. So it was tough. And he took all of that on his shoulders, and he's never complained.
Mhm.
Not once. He's always been there. I can complain about anything and everything and he'll listen. He doesn't always agree, and that's okay. Um, I would rather somebody tell me I'm wrong, even if I don't like it at the moment.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think family and just having a really good support system. I see a lot of people in the community that don't have a good support system, and I can definitely say that, I I see how blessed I was in that sense, how easy that made my transition emotionally. I don't think I would have gotten to the point I am without that support. I don't know if I would have accepted, um, you know, what was going on with me without that support.
Mhm.
So
What helps you what helps you shift from survival mode to advocacy and leadership?
yeah. So acceptance of what I have, right? So NMO, and when they ask me, do you understand what's going on? I'm like, yeah, no. Um, and it just also, when I got curious and started reading my medical records, I think that reading those was eye-opening to me, because I realized how easily things could have slipped through the cracks had he not advocated for me, and how many people don't have that voice. Um, I think my primary care provider, I've had the same primary care provider since 2001. So he's been 24 years, and he's never had a patient with NMO. So knowing that in the medical community, he's got to do his research. And he's like, I read up on it. We're going to keep an eye on this, this, and this. And I'm like, all right. And he's got a great working relationship with my neurologist. So I think knowing I had the supports really helped me move out of that survival mode. And it really, that acceptance, like before this diagnosis, before I was knocked on my butt by my own body, um, I didn't really accept help easily. I was sort of a very strong-willed, determined, I'm gonna do it myself type of person. And now I know that my body isn't always gonna allow that. Um, so acceptance, 1000%.
Have you noticed any impact on diet, nutrition, or symptoms overall well-being?
So The first neurologist I saw straight out of the hospital told me that a Mediterranean diet would help. The only issue with that is I have IBS and just recently found out that it's also diverticulosis. So I have issues with some of these grains, which I knew because the way my stomach would react, but like I didn't have a diagnosis for it, you know. Um, but my husband is he goes grain free. So the kids don't always follow that. The way I put it is, you know, if I stay away from glutens, because it's pretty easy to in my house, um, I do pretty well. I notice that in the mornings I'm never hungry. So if I have a shake and it's got a decent amount of protein, I'm good for a while. And then making sure that I'm drinking enough and it really just focusing on the hydration and making sure I'm getting all those nutrients that are needed. I would definitely say that it was not something I was told I had to do is go gluten free, but like I'll put it this way, it's like a 90% gluten free. It's like gluten free with a cheat day here and there when you're with the family, you know? So yeah, I think that's been helpful. I do notice that I'm a little less stiff in certain areas. I'm a little less sore. I feel like I have more energy when I'm kind of following his diet a little bit. Um, I would say that would be key.
What advice would you give to someone who just got diagnosed with NMO?
Yeah, it gets better and seek support. Look for people that are going through what you're going through now. Um, Ask all the questions you have and don't be afraid to ask them. I think I was nervous to ask people that. I thought I was getting too personal when I asked them about, you know, urinary retention. Um, but if you really look at, you know, when you meet somebody, even online, that has what you have, and you're asking about that, if you preface it with like, hey, I know you have such and such issue like I do. I'm dealing with this. Do you have experience in that? Like just understanding that some of these people have the same issues you do. Um, find your community. I think that's the biggest piece of advice. Um, yeah, it gets better.
What has living with NMO taught you about strength and hope and connection?
Um, I think the way I would put this is sometimes some really, really beautiful and really big things can come out of some really messed up situations. It's I have to say it this way, nothing, I mean like literally nothing. Nothing is permanent in life, right? So, you know, you have to kind of live to your fullest and do what you can, but also just keep fighting, you know. The hope, I honestly, I feel like no patient feels that hope initially, right? We kind of we kind of go inside ourselves, but I think, you know, reaching out to the supports you do have, especially the good ones. Like if you have supports that aren't so great, you know, maybe it's time to look at that a little closer and you know, develop some really good relationships with the supports you do have. Um, and just, you know, keep fighting through it. Like that's really what it's taught me to do is just kind of, you know, how valuable life is, how valuable my eyesight is, you know, my independence, but also how easily that can be taken away too.
Okay, stay tuned to the end of this discussion for a quiz on neuromuscular optica, neuromyelitis optica. Nicki, thank you so much for being here and sharing your incredible story. Your strength, insight, and Advocacy truly embody what rare connection is all about, connecting the rare disease community, educating others, and offering hope. To everyone tuning in, please do not forget, subscribe to the Rare Connection podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on TikTok, Joanna Ball 1. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Rare Chef, where this episode will be posted after airing live on TikTok. It was not able to be live. Connect with me on Facebook at Joanna Ball. LinkedIn, you can follow me on LinkedIn at Joanna Ball or Rare Connection Incorporated. You can follow me on X at Rare Connection Incorporated. So for future podcast episodes, will be offered as premium current content on Apple Podcasts for just $3. This helps keep the show going, while all older episodes will remain free. If you like to support what I do, check out the shirts on Bonfire under Rare Chef. We've got a shirt promoting this podcast, Rare Connection, one that promotes my YouTube channel, Rare Chef, and one raising awareness for invisible disabilities and rare diseases. Every purchase helps cover the cost like groceries for the cooking videos, which also air on YouTube and sometimes TikTok, if they meet the timing guidelines of under 10 minutes. If you're listening to the audio version of this episode, while finding these, you'll find the support the show link in the show notes. And there's also send me a text link for those on the audio platform who don't have access to the comment section. If you're watching on TikTok, feel free to comment directly on this video. I'd love to hear I'd love to hear from you. And finally, if you or someone you love is struggling, please don't go through it alone. Call or text 988 or the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or text hello to 741-741 to reach the Crisis Lifeline text line. You matter. Your story matters, and we're so grateful you're here. Until next time, stay connected and take care. The following quiz is an open book quiz. If you feel you can find the answers on the internet, you're more than welcome to try it. Some of these are podcast related only, and so you would have to go back and search if you can't find the answer, or watch the shorts. What does NMO stand for? That's probably the easiest one. What's the difference between NMO and MS? What's another name for NMO? True or false? NMO is a form of MS. What was NMO discovered? When was NMO discovered? How is NMO diagnosed? What did Nicki say were her symptoms, and what did she say helped with them? How many people are in the ambassador program at the Simari Foundation worldwide? Uh, Sumaira, 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 is the pronunciation of Sumaira. I'm the spelling. What did they? When did they start testing for NMO? How does Nicki travel to see a doctor? How far does Nicki travel to see a doctor? And I'm looking for how long it takes her to get there. She mentioned a couple times in the podcast, but there were more in the second time. Nicki uses which mobility aids? That's the question. You should be able to find all of those answers in the podcast if you're paying attention. And once again, thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next episode, which should be next week.